Hey guys, welcome back to the next episode of what I like to call my story, Organized Chaos by Anna Dreadful here. I just want to say thanks for returning and for watching and subscribing. I really appreciate all the support out there, and again, just spread the word and hopes that it helps others to be able to relate and inspire people and give people hope. That's all I really, am trying to achieve here. So I just want to get right into it. I'm going to try to do something different this time. I'll probably be reading a little bit, but I'm trying to not read so much word for word so it doesn't sound so dull, like I had talked about before. But anyways, so last time we left off basically talking about my childhood a little bit, my parents and my siblings, and I said that the next part kind of gets into more about myself. So that's where we ended last time, so we're gonna just go right into it. And basically, it's about me, as a kid growing up. And, as far back as I can remember, I've always had this self-image issue, this low self-esteem. I've never felt good enough for anyone or anything, whether it was family or friends or boyfriends, teachers, jobs, whatever. I've just always had this constant urge to be a year or two older than what I really was, or truly believing that age would change so much in my life or how people perceived me, and always envying those people that had no care in the world, or could say who gives a shit. And I don't know, it's just I always envied those type of people. And I could never be that because I was always such a negative person, or always thought so bad about myself. There's people that can walk around with a smile on their face and stay positive. I wanted to be that so badly, and I just never could. And I don't know if this sense of unworthiness comes back around to the fact that I grew up in such a small town, which, by the way, was the same exact town that my dad grew up in and was raised in. It's that type of small area where there's not even a separate school for a middle school or a junior high like most areas. My high school was considered a junior senior high school, is what it was called. I'm not going to say the name of it, but it was a junior senior high school, and it was from 7th through 12th grade. And literally from 7th through 12th grade, there was about 500 students total. Yeah, so I literally graduated in 2009 with about 65 other people, including myself, in my graduating class. And, I think that gives a lot of people out there that don't know me an idea of just how small of an area it is. And throughout my life, it's so funny because I've came across so many people that have been I graduated with 300 people, and to me that is just mind blowing. I kind of always wish that I could go to a different school, a bigger school where nobody knew you. But it was always in the back of my mind, but it just never happened. And my school was just that super tiny school. So you can assume that it was a super tight-knit community in the sense where everyone is in people's business, kids, adults, teachers, etc., especially when my dad literally grew up with every single body that I went to school with. He was in school with their parents. I'm not even kidding. Every single person almost that I graduated with, my dad graduated with one of their parents at least. It's crazy. He knew everybody knew him, neighbors, relatives, some way, shape, or form, And you're basically judged by your last name or what your parents' salary was. It was all about money. So The more I write about this or talk about this, I realize how often you hear this in people's stories, but I cannot emphasize enough how true it is in my area. Like, my last name meant nothing to anybody, which in a way had its pros and cons. It didn't particularly have any bad relations towards people, but we weren't the people that you just had to or even wanted to be friends with. So it was kind of like I had to fight my way into people's lives and then hope they didn't use the world against me. And I mean, that's pretty sad, I know, but it's true. So I'm just kind of going back and forth here between some of my stuff because I don't know what's most updated. But I was basically closest with the in crowd throughout all of elementary school. And then like come 8th grade or junior high, it wasn't that we like completely stopped talking or stopped being friends, but it was definitely more like we were just cordial and got along. They didn't mess with me, nor did I mess with them. But you get the looks from the lunch table and you hear the gossip from your group of friends in regards to the popular or rich kids or the jocks or whatever. And like I remember right before we left our elementary school to move into the high school, so it would have been 6th grade or so, these so-called friends went around saying some really awful things about me. And I'll go ahead and say it. They went around making rumors about me smelling like rotten deer meat. I mean, of all things to say, that's the thing they came up with. Okay, but I never even really realized it was supposed to be an insult, but I also knew it wasn't true because, like, yes, my family hunted and I started at exactly the age I was in 6th grade, but it's not like I played around with some like dead deer all day long. Like, I didn't even do that. If I killed a deer, my dad's the one that like did all that stuff. So it was just like crazy that they can even say things like that. And I never like learned how to even like clean or gut a deer the right way until I was like a teenager. So it's just, I don't know, it's crazy and it's embarrassing, but it is what it is. So I assume this was just one of the only things these like mean girls could think to say about me at the time. Knowing my dad hunted and dresses like a redneck, people would believe it. And guess what? Kids will be kids, and they all believed it. So when we were supposed to work together as like a group for something, everyone would avoid me and snickered, and some even said it to my face. And that's when I found out what was going on. And most embarrassing of all, it seemed like all the boys knew more than anyone, and that was the beginning of my interest in boys. So that time in my life was very critical, and I honestly don't remember how the rumor subsided or ended. I'm sure some other poor schmuck became their next target, and knowing how I used to think back then, I probably partook in those actions against the less fortunate because I was happy it wasn't on me anymore and I wanted to fit in or be cool. But, deep down, I was always the one that felt bad for the people who were being bullied or picked on or were shy or had no friends. I ended up being like a mediator between kids in school a lot too. And although I didn't hang out with the more nerdy kids, I did get along with most of them and we would be cordial to one another. Them knowing I didn't mean anything by the actions of my associates or that I was a better person than most, if that makes sense at all, I'm unsure. I know damn well I'm not perfect, and I was mean or ignorant to different kids, and there are some who probably still hate me, but I also know I tried my hardest not to be like the rest of the bullies. And once I was a bit older and actually in high school, like 7th through 9th, grade, you know, more serious rumors began about me. Some were ridiculously silly and were so stupid I won't even waste my time mentioning. I can't even believe I mentioned the first one. It's so stupid and embarrassing, but you know, I'm an adult and it is what it is, and I can, you know, look back at it now and laugh at it and be like, what the hell, you know. But others are important, like how back then, you know, IMing on AOL or Yahoo Messenger was a big deal, and everybody did it after school. That was the fad, that was the cool thing to do, and how people communicated versus like house phones anymore. I mean, yeah, we still called each other, but that was the thing. If you had a computer, you were IMing, right? So I just remember one of the prettiest, most popular girls in school, she was a year ahead of me, messaging me one night out of the blue, asking me questions about boys and like sexual things. And I was so surprised she even wanted to like talk to me. So of course I answered, and at this point I can't remember, you know, to save my life, if I had already had my first official boyfriend or not. But you know, anyways, I come to find out she was only asking me these things because all these older girls in school were going around spreading rumors about me being a slut and already having slept with multiple guys, and I hadn't even lost my virginity yet. So this plagued me most of my high school years. Anytime I was single and interested in dating someone new, most of the boys in my school thought they knew all they needed to know about me and either denied me and acted like I was like the scum on the earth, or they'd play me for a fool, showing like interest to only try to get in my pants because of what they heard, that I must have been easy or something, and then they didn't get what they wanted, so then I became a tease or something. You know how guys can be and what they say. So unfortunately that happened to me, and I know that happens to a lot of people. So this all followed me and continued up until I got into my first serious relationship with an older boy by about 3 years or so. A lot of people reading this will think at the age of 12 or in 7th grade, I, you know, couldn't have possibly experienced true love. And I would argue this case for years and years to come, because I truly felt that he was my first true love. Being older and associated with that like bad boy genre, David, you know, I no longer had to walk around going unnoticed. I craved that attention that boyfriends would or could provide, and this time in my life became a huge turning point for me. Losing my virginity, it was, you know, the entire rave between my friends and me, who was going to have sex with their cool older boyfriend first, you know, honestly believing doing so would like transform us into women. I mean, come on now, it definitely gave us a new perspective on boys and men and life, but people definitely didn't look at us as women. More so they looked at us like, more like they looked down on us for having sex so young. And either we were sluts or teases, or guys looked at us as easy lays. Told you I can be pretty blunt, so I apologize. But anyways, I was with David for 11 months. As we all know, with love comes heartache. And whether our relationship at this age consisted of love or lust, I do know dealing with the breakup was the first time I had to deal with a significant loss of someone I cared for and had feelings towards. He, you know, ultimately left me for an older girl. I think he just got tired of dealing with my craziness, or the fact that I was so young and unable to do all he was able to or wanted to. And either way, he like broke my heart into a million pieces, and then rubbed it in my face at school the following day, walking around with the new girlfriend already. So, you know, at such a young age, that heartbreak rang crucial in later life lessons. Like, I think deep down, I loved the idea of being in love more so than I did the actual person in this case. So, you know, Shortly after getting over him, I would be introduced to one of the most important men in my lifetime for more reasons than I can account for. Brian, or BJ to most, had entered my life so unexpectedly. I was taken aback by his forwardness. After spending only a short amount of time together, we grew close and immediately knew there was some type of connection between the two of us. Now, I had said David was my first real relationship, and to an extent he was. But when I got with BJ, my ideas and thoughts on love and boyfriends didn't exactly change, but as if my mind opened up to new and more possibilities. I didn't just acquire a new boyfriend, but I also gained like a true best friend. BJ was also older by like 3 to 4 years, and he was actually really good friends with David, my first boyfriend, which I wasn't aware of until after the fact. So as you can imagine, things were a bit awkward at times because they'd want to hang out together and it'd be them and us girls. And BJ was always very jealous and controlling and worried that I still had feelings for David, and I hated being around him and his new girl. But continuing with BJ and my relationship, this began some sort of pattern for me, I believe, attracting troubled souls, which goes back to something I said in one of my other episodes about being the fixer. You know, his parents were mostly absent, so he lived with his grandmother. His dad did live right next door in a trailer, but he was a belligerent drunk and addict that was forever causing problems, and fights broke out among the two of them all the time, which then got the grandma involved and upset. Even with all the drama, this was the first real time I was welcome in a boyfriend's home or met his family and like got to know or got close to them, versus just them always coming to my house with my family. Between the two families, it wasn't that difficult to get away with pretty much anything we wanted to most of the time. I mean, there were rules, and this was a time before I was allowed to like stay overnight with boys. I was still young, but I think we even found a way to do that a couple times. Things between us developed rather quickly and got serious super fast. With the age difference came a group of older friends as well, ones that had their licenses and cars and smoked cigarettes and partied every chance they got. So this is where my start of a world with a lot of sex, drugs, alcohol, and rock and roll began. Actually, it wasn't really rock and roll with them back then. It was all about wiggers, and they all thought they were the shit and listened to rap, actually. So when the drugs began to become a reoccurring event when we were together, it mainly was smoking blunts upon blunts of the finest marijuana we could get our hands on. I guess you could say this is where I became a legit stoner or pothead. At the time, I loved smoking weed and how it made me feel. Most of all, the effects it had on me and BJ's sex life. A routine gig for us was catching a buzz with his neighbors and our friends, which was another couple who lived right next door, and the guy would irritate the living shit out of me. None of us could ever really stay mad at each other though that long. After giving each other shotguns off of our blunts or joints and clam baking the hell out of their Dodge Neon car, usually right in their driveway, and to boot, my English teacher lived right next door to them and shared a driveway. So as soon as the door opened up and that whole cloud of smoke rolled out, well, they aren't dumb. Afterwards, we would disappear back to the solace of BJ's bedroom at his Graham's house to do the dirty deed. We would have to lock the door by putting a huge butcher knife in it since the lock was broken. We would occasionally sneak some of his late granddad's old recorded pornos from the 70s to watch in his room together. And you gotta remember, I'm still like only 13, 14 years old, so it's not like I had much porno watching experience. But even I knew this shit was some of the cheesiest stuff ever. Like VHS recorded from the 70s, 80s era. I don't know what it was about smoking weed back then, or maybe it was just when I smoked it with him, but I would get super horny, and we would always have amazing sex when we were stoned. Needless to say, as much as I started to enjoy the weed, it didn't take me long to want to try different types of drugs. I guess my thought process was kind of like this: if weed can make me feel this good, imagine what the heavier shit could do. So, I mean, I've always hated the logo. Marijuana is the gateway drug. I still despise that, but my story kind of makes you think that line is true. Because, you know, I was young, dumb, and a gullible girl in love who believed that the only time Brian was experimenting with other drugs was when I was around, because that was supposed to be the only time I did stuff like that. Yeah, right. As well as smoking weed daily with the neighbor couple, they also became our main source of transportation and picking up our little slice of heaven. Or poor man's dope. Not sure why they call it that, because it's expensive as hell. Oxycontins. Prescription pills. This was and quickly became all of our drug of choice back then. Crazy how quickly it happens. I haven't even heard of these being anywhere around in years. They quickly became like gold, harder than ever to find. Not to say we wouldn't play or toy around with any opioid pills or really any type of pills back then, and drank an abundance of alcohol. Back then, in my earlier years, it was almost guaranteed every time I snorted pills, I'd puke. It got to the point that I'd come home for the night with everyone in bed, sit up, and watch some TV alone in the living room for a while before turning everything off and heading up to bed, just to come find out the next morning, getting ready for school, my dad would get on my case immediately, talking about having to clean up my puke again in front of the TV. I had no recollection of throwing up, or going up to bed for that matter. I guess Dad just assumed I had been drinking, or he just didn't want to admit to himself that I started playing with fire already. Blackouts became a frequent occurrence for me almost any time I drank from here on out. So there is some serious stuff that is involved with this story, or this part of my story. It's a big part of my story, and you know, I'm already at like 20 minutes, so I don't know if people are even gonna watch this whole video. So I don't know how much longer it goes. Let me see. So, like, it pains me to say I really, for the life of me, can't remember how my first time trying dope or heroin came to be. I just know by that point I was, hold on. I had already taken a liking to opiates and the way they were making me feel. I was never really one to turn down a free buzz, let alone trying something new. I mean, don't get me wrong, sure I was hesitant. I heard all the horror stories, as does everyone. Don't for one second think I wasn't brought up to know drugs were wrong. I definitely was. The assemblies in school used to scare the shit out of me, but I also wanted to fit in somewhere, and I thought that fell somewhere along the lines of inside a man's arms. This is like a effing boomerang, or some type of cycle looping back around, knowing what I need to do and who to avoid, but still walking right into their traps. Anyways, like the pills, I just snorted it, and the burn I'd feel was an unforgettable sensation. It's one of those things that hurt or feel so uncomfortable, yet in some sense becomes a guilty pleasure. That wasn't even the worst part, though. What became my favorite part of snorting any and all types of drugs was labeled as the drip. After snorting a powder substance, especially if you added a few drops of water up the nostril that you snorted it in, then you would get a nasal drip going down the back of your throat. Sometimes it would make me gag. Well, 90% of the time it did. Because as much as I say I love these drips, they tasted straight like shit. But it got to the point that if I didn't get some form of drip after snorting drugs or pills, then I'd rack my brain thinking I did something wrong and then wasn't going to get high or feel the full effects. It almost became an addiction all in itself for me to have water nearby to quickly snort after sniffing lines of pills or heroin or coke, etc. But knowing what I know now, there was sure signs of BJ using behind my back, or when I wasn't there. I mean, how naive could I have been when I found a syringe underneath his mattress, and his excuse was that one of his friends, who happened to be my ex-boyfriend David, actually relocated to Baltimore, and he supposedly left it there because he got into selling and doing heavier shit. And so he hid it under his mattress from his grandma so nobody could see it or find it. I mean, I think I knew deep down, but I loved him so much at this point that I just wanted to believe him more than anything. And boy, was I gullible to all his constant lies. So, yeah, this gets pretty deep and pretty serious, and I'm going to leave it off here. So there's a little bit of a cliffhanger. For those of you that know me, I'm sure you know what comes next, or you know some of it. But there's definitely some people involved that might be interested in listening more, because they're coming up next, and there's some really important things that happened in my life at this point that like really defined who I am today, or started defining my life when it happened, and made me who I am today, or part of me, and will always be part of me. So yeah, it's getting real. We're finally getting to some of the real stuff. Not that it's funny, but just saying, it's about to get really real, guys. So I just want to thank you guys again for watching, and again, like, comment, subscribe, leave me some feedback, tell me what I could do better, or how long I should make these videos, you know, whatever you want to do. I also decided that if I do get some comments or questions, instead of doing them on my videos, I'm going to do a separate video just for like Q&A, because of taking up time on my videos when I'm reading. So that'll happen in the future. If anybody's interested, just watch for a Q&A video on my channel, okay? Anyways, thanks again for coming back and listening to Hannah Dreadful. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you come back to hear more of my story called Organized Chaos. Alright? Thanks, guys. Bye.